Do you struggle with financial, physical, emotional, psychological, or professional boundaries? Then you don't want to miss this episode of So Victory Live today with Barb Nangle. She will help you figure out what thoughts and beliefs you have that aren't serving you. You're watching So Victory Live with Brigetti and Shannon Malcolm Daniels. Don't go away. We will be right back.
So Victory Live is all about sharing stories to ignite and inspire victories. We are here on Wednesdays, and our first, third, and fifth Wednesdays, we go live at 11 a.m. New York time, and second and fourth Wednesdays at 9 p.m. New York time. And you can get all this information at sovictory.com/talk-show. Now, after the
Hi everyone, my name is Brigetti Limbanda from Cape Town in South Africa. I'm your host for today. Shannon Malcolm Daniels will be back on our next episode. Our amazing guest for today is Barb Nangle. Barb is a boundaries coach, a writer. She hosts the podcast Fragmented to Whole. She helps people figure out what thoughts and beliefs you have. And sometimes she says you don't even know that you have them. So she helps you figure out what are the beliefs that are not serving you and how you can build healthy boundaries. Who of us does not need this in our life? And so let me give a hearty warm welcome to Barb Nangle. Bob?
Hi, Brigetti.
Welcome.
Thank
Great
you.
to have you join us today. So glad that you've made the time. I know that you're one of those very, very, very busy people.
I like it that way.
I know busy is good, isn't it? Busy is absolutely good.
Yeah, they say if you want to get something done, ask a busy person. That's because we get shit done.
Absolutely. There's no better way of putting that.
Yeah.
And so I want to thank you so much. You've sent us some pictures of yourself, and I think if it's okay with you, we'll dive right into that.
Absolutely.
They say a picture tells a story, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Zeph is watching us in the comments, and Claire's watching us in the comments, and they're giving you a shout out and saying hello, welcome to the show. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back into the green room for just a little bit and just give you some space to just give us a brief introduction of yourself and explain what your story is giving us with some of those pictures. So I'll see you back in a minute.
Okay, sounds good. So this is me in 2010. I am down over 100 pounds from my top weight. I am in 2 12-step recovery programs. That's really the gist of my story. I got into recovery initially because of codependence, and a year later I learned that I was a compulsive overeater. I didn't even know that that was a thing. And I like to show these pictures of me being heavy because even though I can tell you that I'm down over 100 pounds from my top weight, and I'm sure you believe me, there's nothing like a picture to show this. Now, I feel like not only am I heavy here, but I look swollen, and also my skin doesn't really look healthy. I mean, I was just patently a very unhealthy person at the time, and I feel like I'm 59 now. So this was 12 years ago, and I am definitely the healthiest I have ever been in my entire life. And I mean that physically, emotionally, spiritually, mentally, in every, way you can possibly imagine. And even though I had done a lot of work in my 20s with cleaning up a lot of the negative self-talk, it wasn't until I got into recovery in 2015 at the age of 52 that I realized there was so much more going on in my mind that I didn't realize. And some of it I call subterranean. I think of it as below subconscious. Some of it like prelingual. So there wasn't even language necessarily tied to what was going on in my mind. For example, I often had this feeling of wanting to like shrink and get smaller and back off. And when I was able to put words to that, I realized the words were, I'm too much. And until I had words to connect with that, I couldn't use words to turn that around. And the affirmation that I created for myself to turn that around is, I'm just the right amount of everything. And that has helped me so much. When I first started saying it, I didn't really believe it. And that's the thing about affirmations, is you don't have to believe them. The way I think of it is that you've been poisoning the reservoir of your mind your entire life if you beat yourself up and saying negative things. And so stopping putting the poison in is good, and eventually the reservoir of your mind will purify. However, it will purify so much more quickly if you put medicine in as the antidote to the poison. And the medicine in this case is affirmations. And my experience is it takes just a fraction of the time that you have been poisoning the well to kind of clean that up. So for example, I was 52 when I got into recovery. I had all this negative stuff going on. And within the first 2 years of recovery, I had really turned most of that around. So it appears to me as if the pictures are not advancing, Brigetti. This one is stuck on 28. Is there any way that you can possibly manually make the picture go forward?
You know, I was wondering about that as well.
I'm happy to just.
I think we've got a tech gremlin here, because there was a picture that I really loved that you sent us that we started off with, and I don't know what's going on.
There we go.
Okay. There we go. I love that picture. Tell me about that picture.
Okay, so this picture is in the relatively new coffee shop in New Haven, Connecticut, where I'm from, and it's called Pistachio. And I love ornate things. I love this chair. I love all of the decor in this place. And the reason that I found it is that after one of my weekly 12-step meetings, which is with a bunch of women, we go out after coffee. And this is our new place that we go to. I love that. Yay, Claire, steal that. I'm the right amount of everything. And what's really important about this is one of the things I was incapable of doing before I got into recovery was reaching out for help with other people. And I learned how to do that in recovery. And I'll say more about this later on, but learning how to form healthy boundaries, it was really important for me to have people to reach out to and ask for help. So I've already talked about.
I'm going to just fast forward that one a little bit.
Yeah, okay. And I know that there's at least one more, if not. So this is from when I was 37. So this would be 22 years ago. And of course, there's food in the picture. This particular picture, I was on a wine tour in Long Island with a bunch of friends. Not only am I no longer compulsively eating, but I don't do any drugs or alcohol or anything like that. I am not an alcoholic, but I drank abusively until I was in my early 40s, and I smoked tons of weed. And I now know that it was because I grew up with what's called relational trauma. I did not understand that. When I was a teenager and I started smoking weed and drinking, I thought I was cool. And I now know that I was numbing because my life was really too difficult for me. And so, this is a picture of this is how I spent my time, indulging in all different kinds of things, thinking that I had close friendships with people when I really didn't. This is a picture from Christmas in, I think, 2012. So this would have been almost 10 years ago. And what's really interesting here is I thought that I was really happy. What you can't see is that I am on the arm of my then sweetheart, John. And that was a 5-year relationship. And it was the most codependent relationship I had. The most codependent romantic relationship that I ever had. And I feel like I look miserable in this photo. I mentioned earlier about the way that my skin looked in the other photo. So not only do I look really heavy, but my skin looks really unhealthy. And I really thought I looked great when this picture was taken. And believe it or not, this was me happy. And I just feel like I, do not look happy at all in that picture. So let's see. Oh, and then, so this is me well into my recovery. So in the fall of 2018, I was blessed to be able to take a 6-week solo road trip in a camper van around the country, mostly out west. This is in Albuquerque at the top of a mountain where there was a tram ride. And this trip, first of all, I never could have taken it before recovery. And secondly, I would have made it through this trip because on this trip, the van that I rented was such a piece of crap that it saw 4 different mechanics, and the owner had to put over $2,000 worth of repairs into it. And even despite all of that, I still had a wonderful vacation. This particular photo I put in here because it was the first time almost 2 weeks into the trip before I finally got to see one of these amazing vistas that I had intended to see on my trip around the country. And so I was so delighted that I finally got to see something gorgeous. This is another picture from my road trip. So this is in Sedona, Arizona. And I had my friend, which was a very serendipitous meeting. She and I met at a 12-step meeting in Sedona, but we knew each other from the East Coast. I originally met her at a 12-step meeting in Cape Cod, and I was in this meeting in Sedona, and she walked in. I was like, oh my God, Andrea, what are you doing here? So we spent the day together in Sedona, and I'm high powered. My business is called Higher Power Coaching and Consulting because I've really, the way that we talk about it in recovery is we find a power greater than ourselves. And so I call that my higher power. I usually actually call my higher power God. And so when I saw this picture with the rug on it, I don't remember what it stood for. It didn't stand for higher power, but it was the name of the shop. And I was like, Andrea, you have to take a picture of me in front, with the HP carpet. And this is my sweetheart, Chuck. So I was 55 and he was 60 when we met. This is the first healthy relationship I ever had in my life. And I will tell you right now, it has everything to do with healthy boundaries. What's really cool is that Chuck and I had met peripherally, like I knew him peripherally before my road trip. But while I was in Sedona, outside that 12-step meeting, there was a labyrinth. And I was taught that walking a labyrinth is a spiritual practice. And I was at the tail end of my trip and I wasn't ready to go home. I was also taught, like when you go into a labyrinth, you ask a question, and I didn't know what to ask. So I just said, God, what would you have me be or do? And when I walked the labyrinth, Chuck came into my mind and I was like, oh, this must mean I'm supposed to reach out to him to express my gratitude for something that he had done for one of my communities. And it turned out that when I reached out to him, I had to get his number from someone else. We got into this text exchange, by the end of which I was like, I think I want to date this man. And here I am almost 4 years later, deeply in love with him. And one of the things that attracted me the most to him at the very beginning of our dating relationship is that he has excellent boundaries. And by then I had excellent boundaries too. And that has had everything to do with the status of our relationship. So one thing that people who don't have healthy boundaries don't understand about having boundaries is that it's not just about like saying no to people and telling people what you don't want. It's also telling people what you do want. And it means letting good things in, like help and support and praise and compliment. So in my previous relationships, I acted like I had no needs and I was there to meet all their needs. And I just know that that's not realistic in this relationship. And one of the things that I am able to do with Chuck and he is able to do with me is ask for help. And this is a picture from the fall of 2019. We went to Stonington, Maine and stayed in an Airbnb. It was a 10-day trip. And it was the first vacation we ever took together, and it was absolutely delightful. I will also say, Brigetti, it looks as if this picture is frozen as well. It's stuck on 21 seconds. There we go. Okay, this is another picture of Chuck and I. Oops! I want to say something about that last picture of Chuck and I. That was at Letchworth State Park in upstate New York. It's called the Grand Canyon of the East. We took that vacation in the fall of last year. And I had been wanting to go to Letchworth State Park for the longest time. And we finally went. And that little guy in his pocket, his name is Russell. And the first Christmas that Chuck and I were dating, which was the Christmas of 2018, we went for a hike on Christmas Day in West Rock Park, which is right around the corner from where Chuck lives. And we found Russell face down in the mud. And we know his name is Russell because the back of his shirt says Russell Stover. And then I bought a yellow bandana and cut it so that it would fit him, because I have another teddy bear that I bought on my road trip because I needed somebody that had a permanent smile on their face like a teddy bear. And I bought it in Albuquerque, where that other picture was. And my other teddy bear's name is Marty, and he is yellow with a red shirt. And I put a red bandana on him, so they kind of match each other. This is not my picture, so I don't know. Are we done with all of my pictures? I can't hear you.
Yes, I think we've gone through all of them. Oh my gosh, I was just listening to what you were saying and just lapping it up.
Oh, good.
I really love that you said boundaries are not just about what we don't want, because I think that's what we imagine in our heads.
Right.
Is verbalizing what we don't want, and you said it's so much more than that. And I was looking at your pictures, and you mentioned that one picture where you were in an unhealthy relationship and how that affected your skin, and you may have in your mind thought you were happy at the time, but now looking back, you can see how you've changed. I mean, it's like day and night. I also love that you talked about being able to verbalize how you feel and look, and that you can't change that unless you can put words and thoughts to it.
Right.
Talk to us a little bit about that and how that helped you move from unhealthy boundaries to healthy boundaries.
So I think when I think about like what's the core of me being someone who used to bend over backwards and was super accommodating to everybody and ran myself ragged to someone who has healthy boundaries, the core is that I grew to care more what I think of me than what other people do. And that doesn't mean that I don't care what other people think about me. Of course I do. What I mean by that is I used to be willing to throw my integrity out the window and say yes when I meant no, to say no to things that I really wanted to say yes to, but I didn't because I was afraid of what other people would think of me. And I was dishonest. That's what that is. So people pleasing is dishonest and manipulative. I didn't understand that. And it's dishonest because we're saying no when we mean yes, etc. And it's manipulative because I didn't realize I was doing it because I wanted people to like me. Well, now, Brigetti, I like me. And I care more about being an honest woman of integrity than I do that you will like me. So, and I like me, one, because I'm honest, I tell the truth, I don't manipulate, and I ask for what I want. I live my life the way I want. And I have so much more to give other people. So, for example, I used to call myself a volunteeraholic before recovery. And when I got into recovery, I quit everything. And I said, you know who I'm going to volunteer for? I'm going to volunteer for Barb. Well, now that I've been in recovery for a while, and even just the first year or so in recovery, I give so much more service to my community than I ever did before when I was a volunteeraholic. But I do it from a place of abundance. And I mean that in a couple of different ways. One, I fill my cup up first. So I take really good care of myself. I do things that energize me, and I stay away from things that drain me. So my cup runneth over. And secondly, when I used to go to the world to give, it was like me, like me, like me, like me. And now I'm not doing that. I don't need you to like me the way I used to, because I like me. So I go to the world to give. And what I have to give is love, because I fill myself up with love. So it's from a completely different standpoint. And when I give service now, I do it on my terms. I do it in limited time frames. And some of it is scheduled, and I pick and choose. That's the thing about boundaries. When you have healthy boundaries, you make conscious choices. When you don't have healthy boundaries, you're what we call a reactor rather than an actor. In other words, you're letting life happen to you and reacting to it as opposed to acting on life. And so I hope that answers your question. I mean, that's the gist of what happened for me in terms of going from no boundaries to having boundaries.
Oh my gosh, you just so many gems in here. People, if you have just started watching the show, if you've missed the beginning of the show, if you missed what Bob just said, please press the replay button. In fact, if you're watching this live and you've been watching it live, just go back and rewatch that, because that is such an important point in your life. You have to fill your own cup first. And I like that you said you come from a different place where you're giving. And why this strikes a chord with me is because we live in a very, very bad culture at the moment, where people turn everything into a photo opportunity. I'm often gobsmacked by the amount of pictures where people are donating to needy people, and you wonder, well, at what point do you think it was important to put the bag of groceries down so that you could first take a picture? So from what place did you give? What was your motive for giving?
Yeah.
It just really makes one think.
Yeah, agreed. Yep. Well, one of the things that I wanted to share, if we have time, is what I call them my top 3 tools of recovery, but they're really top 3 tools for having a well-lived life. So the first one,
I really would like for you to share that. So what we'll do is we'll take a really, really quick break, because I want people to get those top 3 tools.
Okay.
So we're taking a very, very quick break, and then just have your note pens ready for these top 3 tools from Bob. Bob, let's hear your top 3 tools.
Okay. All right. So tool number 1 is pausing. I cannot use any of my other tools of recovery or for living well if I don't pause. And when I first got into recovery and I heard that pausing was a thing, I was like, great idea. I don't know how to do it. So what happened for me was I learned that pausing was a thing. And so what would happen is I'd be like, oh, that thing 2 weeks ago, that would have been a good time to pause. And then sometime later I'd be like, oh, that thing a week ago, that would have been a good time to pause. So what I saw was the time between when I needed to pause and when I realized I could pause started to close. And I got really excited about, ooh, maybe I'll be able to pause. And eventually I was able to do that. So sometimes my pauses are for a moment, just because I need a moment to think. Sometimes it's for a couple of days. I once had a decision, I paused for 1.5 years. My second most important tool of recovery is reaching out for help. And I, as a, super accommodator, bender over backwards, rescuer, fixer, it was impossible for me to learn how to ask for help with people. And learning how to do it was a very humbling experience for me. What I realized with the women that I was doing the 12 steps with in recovery was that all of us were having a really hard time reaching out for help. And so we made a pact with each other. We're going to stop talking ourselves out of reaching out for help. And then we still couldn't do it. So that's how hard it is to learn to reach out for help. But let me tell you something, help is awesome. I love help. And the reason I say it was a humbling experience to learn about asking for help is that I realized that, number one, I thought that it was weak. And here's the thing, it's not weak, it's actually strong. Picture 10 people standing together holding hands. That's so much stronger than one person standing alone. Secondly, there's a built-in assumption that weak is somehow bad. Weak is not bad, weak is just weak, but it's not weak. And what that taught me was that I, at least subconsciously, believed that all these people I'd been fixing and rescuing and helping and stuff in the past, that somehow I was better than them. Now, intellectually, I don't believe that I'm better than anybody, but on an emotional level, I clearly believe that. And getting over that hurdle enabled me to be able to ask for help. And for me, asking for help both means from other people, but also from my higher power. Because even though I was a spiritual person before I got into recovery, I didn't use God. I didn't say, show me your will for me, or I need guidance, or take this weight from me, or whatever. And then my third most important tool is what I call keep the focus on yourself. And I mean that in 4 different ways. So one is, what do I want in this particular situation? Or what do I need to think or feel? That was not a question I asked myself. The second one is, what's my part in this? This is something I learned to do in recovery. So I didn't know this, but I was walking around blaming everybody else for everything. And I've learned in recovery that even if I didn't cause something, what is something I could do to change things? The third part of keeping the focus on myself is minding my own business. So I didn't realize this, but I gossiped all the time before recovery. I was constantly sticking my nose in other people's business, giving unsolicited advice, talking about other people. So now I mind my own business. And then the fourth way of keeping the focus on myself is self-care. What am I doing to take care of myself? And I'm not talking about getting your hair done and your nails done. That is maintenance. I'm talking about, what do you do to take care of yourself? For me, much of it has to do with what am I doing to take care of my physical body, but it also has to do with my spiritual and emotional health. So that's my top 3 tools: pausing, reaching out for help, and keeping the focus on yourself.
Oh, wow, Bob. I think, everybody, you really, this is an episode you want to watch and rewatch, because those images and messages that you have in your head that are not serving you may have been there for years and years and years. They don't go away instantly. It's sometimes it can be like a stuck record. So how can people reach out to you? Because, I want to just encourage everyone who's watched this to reach out to you and connect with you. And everyone, if you're watching the show right now, when we say goodbye in a few minutes, because unfortunately time goes by so, so quickly, you do want to hang around, because the show doesn't end right here. When the live camera goes off, we have a post-show meet and greet session. So you have another opportunity to actually talk to Bob face to face. So come and join us in the after show meet and greet, for a little bit more intimate conversation.
Wonderful.
Bob, this was
Yeah.
amazing.
Thank you. So my favorite place to hang out on social media is on Instagram, and I am at Higher Power Coaching. I am also the host of the podcast Fragmented to Whole, Life Lessons from 12-Step Recovery. You can find it on any podcast outlet, or you can go to fragmentedtowhole.com to find me. And my website is higherpowercc.com. I have all kinds of free resources for boundaries on that website. Love to hear from you. Let me know that you found me on this show too. That'd be great. You're welcome, Claire. Stick around. Love to meet you.
Absolutely, absolutely. I cannot thank you enough. I think this was just so much wisdom in there, because I think a lot of us, I want to ask you one last thing before we say goodbye.
Okay.
Oftentimes people don't recognize that they are in an unhealthy relationship. Can you give us, what is a giveaway that you are in an unhealthy relationship?
You're not making choices. You feel compelled to do things and say things and be things that you're not.
I think that's fantastic. So that's a great way to end our show today. So again, just a reminder, please do come and join us over on the meet and greet session with Bob. And thanks very much, everyone, for having joined us today. Bob, a huge, big shout out to you, and thank you. And we'll see you all in the meet and greet.
All right. Thanks, Brigetti.